because I had I was more focused on what was happening with them. I was listening better. I was able to take in information better.
One of the powerful things that teachers can do as they're considering and planning for the assessment that's a part of their practice is ensuring that there are many, many different kinds of opportunities for fostering student voice, student ownership, and student agency. And that is critical at all parts of the learning cycle. So ensuring that it's built into accessing prior knowledge pieces that we do when we're planning, the connecting pieces of our lesson planning, the processing and the transforming into products that we create. And hearing from students about how it is that they're doing with their learning. How is their learning going? That's a critical piece of really being able to lift up the voices of every kid. We want to hear from them what their next steps in learning are, how it is that we can support, their parents or families can support their learning.
Because the point of agency, the point of building an environment of where students have that voice and choice is to ensure that we have equity, aspiring towards having inclusive classrooms or culturally responsive classrooms where we have created environments where students' identity is celebrated, where students feel empowered.
So when we think about incorporating Indigenous ways of knowing, being, and doing, in order to do that authentically, it is about grounding ourselves within our relationship to land and place, our understandings of our responsibilities to those who've been stewards of this land since time immemorial, and that nurturing of a deeper sense of self. And so one of the things that I think is so powerful about authentically incorporating Indigenous pedagogies is that it really does allow every student to start to explore themselves and their own relationship to the places that they're currently living, to their own relationship to knowledge. And so I think that it's really beautiful when we think about the ways in which we allow students to represent their identities in the classroom through things like voice, choice, and agency, when we think about project-based learning, when we think about opening up assessment so that students are able to construct something that's meaningful for them, that allows them to share their true and whole self in that process. Not every single student is going to feel comfortable, which is why it's always an invitation, but it really does allow for a depth of understanding. And when we think about Indigenous pedagogies and the way that they walk alongside conversations that we're having around equity and anti-racism pedagogies, that it's so important that we are showcasing that we have to allow space for our students to represent themselves in meaningful ways. We need to learn who our students are so that they can see themselves represented in our classrooms, and to do so in a way that invites a greater depth of understanding of the whole.
I find if we tell them what to do too often, they lose themselves, they don't know who they are, and they don't know what they really want and what decisions they can make for themselves. So I think the more that we can guide them to be creative and make decisions, get excited about which content they're doing or what they're choosing, the more responsible they're going to be, the more they're going to know who they are, and the more that they're used to that critical thinking aspect, like how do I feel about this and what do I want to learn, so that puts that agency back in their hands and that autonomy and that self-growth. And if we're talking about preparing students for the workforce and life and holistic health, they really need to know themselves well. So I'd like to think my assignments in my classroom guide them to that point, where it's not just about the content is the driver, but they have a lot of autonomy to choose how they want to present it or how they want to create it.
I decided to do a gladiator helmet, and I wanted to do a 3D printer and to have a physical copy of something. So the teacher helped me with going onto Tinkercad and setting that all up and then showing me what to do. And after that, I just did my research and printed it off.
I'm doing residential schools for my project, and so I drew a picture of a First Nations little girl, and I wrote a letter from her to her parents from the residential schools. It's something that needs to be talked about more.
So my website is about the different classes of the feudalism system. So you got peasants, you got knights, you got nobles, and you have kings. And basically there's like different links, and then when you click on them, it takes you to a different page all about them that I wrote.
I do reflect on it in my own time sometimes. I read my essays or something, or my poems. I do reflect what I can do better and what I can improve on, like punctuation and everything, because I personally think I have OCD and I like to have everything perfect, so I
think all of this builds their confidence in who they are. Because you'll ask someone, a teenager, what do you like, who are you? I think more and more we're moving towards helping kids discover that.
I've been in education for over 30 years. And so, at this point in my career, I want to see spaces for kids to thrive. And I want to see the efforts that I make to be those that draw from what kids are bringing versus push things on them that harm them. So we've got some work to do. But when I've seen learners with diverse abilities and backgrounds shine, it not only empowers them, but it often teaches the rest of us what's possible.
How am I incorporating an authentic student's lived experience within my process of teaching, within my process of assessing, within my process of evaluation? And thinking about what students are looking for, or what students need, or what students hope to accomplish, and less so what I hope they accomplish or what I need them to do. This is not to say that we abandon our own requirements for those of the student, but trying to find a way that we can balance these two things. It's a bit of a management scenario to try to incorporate and understand all of the different pieces that these students are bringing in. But ultimately, if I'm able to address their needs or address their wonderings, or even better, if I'm able to help them pursue those wonderings and pursue those interests, I find that students are far more engaged and far more interested and care much more deeply about the learning they're doing because it comes from their own initiative and not just mine.
We do class meetings where we discuss things. So they get to run the meetings, they get to bring up the questions, they control the narrative around the meeting. We also, as a class, have come up with strategies for things that we needed to work on as a class. So early on, we realized that transitions were difficult for us. So as a class, we made a game plan of what does a transition look like? And then we wrote it up, and we have visual cues in the room to help us with those transitions so that they can be more successful at that goal that we've made together. So I try to give them voice with the things that we are deciding to work on as a class so that they're involved in the decision that's being made, and then also the follow through on what are we doing to make that decision happen.
We are trying to find a solution to sometimes a classroom community issue. How do we improve the locker room issues? So they will work together as a group and kind of plan a solution together that they all agree upon. If they feel comfortable enough to share, if not, I'll kind of go to individual tables, kind of mine their ideas, and then we will put them on the board, we'll do a vote, and then we'll try to implement that solution that they came up with.
I'm noticing once we understand the philosophy and the purpose of why we're moving towards the idea of goal setting and the idea of skill building versus task completion, that students are focusing more on what they can do next and focusing more on that feedback aspect of that formative assessment that we're trying to really highlight as we move towards a feedback-centric classroom. And we're really noticing that teachers are starting to use more of their observations, more of their conversations as valuable assessment tools rather than thinking about always having a product and always assessing after the fact. Whereas when we talk about curricular competencies, it's all about process and how are we assessing the processes and how are we having our students think about their processes and being metacognitive about their learning and reflecting at the end to think about how they can get better for next time.
I'm going to try and focus a little more. I know I get distracted quite easily and sometimes I'll go off topic, so my learning goal in general is to really try and like sit down in class and just focus and then talk when it's time to talk and do all that.
I'm advanced in math, so I was at this point where I just kept getting upset because I was like the stuff we were getting was way too easy for me. So then I was able to write in my thing that like stuff were too easy. So now I'm getting harder stuff, which is helping me improve more, because otherwise it's mostly like I'm not learning, I'm just like reviewing stuff that I already know, whereas now I'm getting stuff that I don't know and I get stuck, which is really helpful, because then you get to know what you need to improve on so you can improve on it.
I think because if we self-assess our core competencies, then we can, because the teachers may not always see what we think is strongest, they only see in some cases what we put forward in work. And if they know what we think, then they can overlap those two and find somewhere where that meets, and it's closer to what's actually correct than what the teacher sees or just what the student sees.
So I have a poster that I make, and we take each of the core competencies and we break it down, and they help me come up with what words to use to describe that. So what does communication look like? What does collaboration look like? The tougher ones too, like creative thinking, critical thinking. They don't know that they're doing them, but they're doing them. So I do the big poster and they help me with that, and then anytime we're reflecting on that, I pull the posters out. They need more breakdown of what that physically and tangibly looks like for them, because they're amazing at doing those core competencies. At least I feel like they're set up well to do them in my classroom. So I find that helps them use the language around reflecting on it. If you just say, how did you communicate in this activity? They're like, I don't know what that means. So how did you speak to somebody else? How did you share your ideas? How did you actively listen? Yeah.
At the beginning of the year when we did it, it helped me figure out what I was really like stuck on or what I needed to work on. Because then now I can go back and be like, oh, I'm trying to work on like maybe public speaking more often. And I can be like, I should maybe set a goal for, that's what we've done. We've set goals to help us improve with our stuff. Like this kind of helps with my public speaking goal, because before I had trouble just like speaking at all, but now I'm doing it more. So I'm just working on the things I struggle with so I can get better.
Having the environment be really accessible to the kids is important. I want them to be able to run the show by themselves at a certain point, so I can just kind of step aside and observe, and they have the agency to be able to just have complete ownership of this as their space. So a lot of the things that we've kind of created in the classroom are ways for them to access what they need to learn and to work together without me having to show them where it is or dig it out for them or set it up for them. They can do it all on their own. So they've got all of their learning supplies are in their own bins. We have visual instructions for what we're working on. We have like their literacy aids, their alphabet charts, their name tags, kind of where they can reach and that kind of thing.
It's good to build up relationships too, and a lot of times for our desk sheeting, we'll like switch it up so you're not with the same people and working with the same people all the time. And if you have an opinion and another person has an opinion, you can like discuss it as a group. So it's not just like one person's wrong and one person's right, then you can like discuss it.
Also, if you're kind of stuck on like a bias while doing a report or something, and you like check with your friend, they can be like, oh, there's like a little bit of a bias here, and you can be like, oh, that's right, so you can fix it. So it's really good to know other people's opinions, because a lot of times you can overlook things and someone else might not overlook it, or they could overlook something else and you could be like, oh wait, you forgot about this. And I think it just makes everything better.
One of the big things that I think for kids in order to engage as a participant in their learning is that they do need to feel that they are part of the process, and that curriculum isn't a thing just happening to them. I'm not there just dumping knowledge on them, that they're actually an active participant and that they have a team surrounding them to help them learn and grow. And so a part of doing a portfolio and then setting intentional goals is that it needs to be coming from them what they think is next for them in their learning. And so part of it, it's hard for kids to think of a tangible goal in terms of curriculum, because sometimes they do feel like, I don't know what's next in math, or I don't know what's next in reading. So when they look at their feedback and their report card comments and they look at their portfolio, they're able to be like, oh, well, this is an area where I could grow. And then together we refine it to make sure that these goals are really an area that they're working on.
You know, that idea of, you know, never about us without us, as we've talked about that from an Indigenous perspective, you know, translates also well just into the classroom perspective to who our students are. So, you know, really getting to know their identities, their strengths, and then building from that.
I think it's good to like be able to also communicate to your teachers like what you need to improve on, because sometimes like you know that you need like extra help on something, but you don't like communicate that, or you don't say anything, and your teacher just doesn't know. So if you just go out and tell like them, then they understand it and they're able to help you. But it's also like sometimes people don't want to be like, I don't understand this. So if the teacher's like, is there anything you don't understand, then it's an easy way they can bring it up and like slide it into a conversation.